When I came to the table, I froze, watching my wife's jaw drop and a hole form in her mouth, giving her an unattractive appearance. Douglas started to get up, but I quickly raised my hand to signal him to stay put. "No, Douglas, stay where you are. As long as you're sitting, you're safe. But if you stand up, I will have no choice but to sink my teeth into your throat," I warned. "Please, just sit down. I don't want to make a scene." Apologizing for interrupting their intimate moment, I felt the tension in the air. "Julia, I'm completely shocked to learn that you pretended to be sick so that you wouldn't spend the weekend with me, all in order to be with that despicable Douglas. In my eyes, he really is the lowest of the low. It's hard to believe that you chose him over our special place, where we first met, where I proposed to you, and where we shared so many wonderful memories. This place used to mean so much to me, but now it's lost its magic, just like you. On our wedding day, you made promises that you clearly aren't going to keep. I promised never to intentionally hurt you or do anything that would make you stop loving me, but I am afraid that these promises may already be broken. I am deeply hurt, and I feel that my love for you is fading. It feels like betrayal, Julia. You know me better than anyone else. You know that I approach situations like a systems analyst. I observe, analyze, identify problems, and look for solutions. In this case, it seems that you want to date other men, as evidenced by your relationship with Douglas. I'm your husband, and I don't let you date other men, so obviously, the problem is with me. My solution is to fix the problem, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, you're free to date anyone. I hope this useless relationship is worth it, Julia." Turning to Douglas, I added, "Douglas, our case is not over yet. I'll see you again." I walked briskly to the exit and went outside. I hurried across Michigan Avenue and around the corner to the lobby of the Drake Hotel. I watched from afar as Julia hurried out of the spa onto the sidewalk, her eyes darting in search of me. Despite her best efforts, she still couldn't see me. Defeated, she sighed and crossed the street, hailing a taxi that was supposed to take her to our house. I was confused but found solace in the fact that I had disrupted her plans with Douglas and that she cared enough to search for me. She would have been disappointed to find that I wasn't there. I waited a few more minutes to see what Douglas would do. Soon, he got out of the car, hailed a taxi, and drove off in the opposite direction. I decided to stay at the Drake Hotel for a few days until I figured out what to do with my life. So, I went inside and was able to rent a room. You're probably wondering how we got to this point, so I'll tell you everything. My name is John Barton, and my wife, of course, is Julia. When I graduated from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, I got a job in Chicago at Gray System Solutions as a software developer. It was a pleasure to work for Greg Gray, the owner of the company and my boss. He was a fair and benevolent leader, which allowed me to quickly move up the career ladder and achieve success in my role. It was at the annual Christmas party that Greg introduced me to Julia, his goddaughter and the daughter of his closest friend. It quickly became clear that Greg had arranged this meeting with the intention of bringing us together. I couldn't help but be grateful to him for that because, as soon as I saw Julia, I was overcome by a feeling of love at first sight. I was completely fascinated by Julia, considering her to be the most amazing woman I had ever met. Her wit, humor, and all the other qualities I could desire in a partner only increased my passion. It was clear to anyone that I was head over heels in love with her. Our bond was instant and undeniable, and it didn't take long for us to become inseparable. It all started with a party at Spaga, and it quickly became our special place. 3 months later, during a romantic Saturday date at Spaga, I proposed to her. Without hesitation, she rushed into my arms and said yes. Our marriage was a dream come true, and our lives improved every day. We both had successful careers and often celebrated this with dinners at our house. We tied the knot in the 10th year, and everything was perfect until about 6 months ago. I felt that the honeymoon phase was coming to an end. Although I knew this phase didn't last forever, I couldn't help but feel something was amiss. I was absolutely sure that nothing suspicious was going on, but this nagging sense of lost romance was hard to ignore. I decided to take matters into my own hands and started organizing a secret trip for us. My close friend and former roommate Adam Hartley worked in the software industry with his father, Ben, who turned out to be a client of Greg's company. Since I often visited their offices in Cleveland, I decided to schedule our trip for one of these visits. Our destination was Cleveland, where we were supposed to meet Adam, Ben, and their wives, Caroline and Gloria, for dinner on Friday night. On Saturday morning, we had a quick business meeting, after which we were supposed to go to Niagara Falls for a couple of days together. I wanted to renew our relationship and have a romantic second honeymoon. Julia seemed to have doubts about going, and I had to convince her of the need to go despite her reluctance. I hoped she would enjoy the surprise. On Friday morning, I woke up to find that Julia had disappeared from our bed. I looked for her and found that she was sleeping in our spare bedroom. I asked quietly, "Julia, are you awake?" She stirred and answered, "John, I got sick last night and moved into the spare room so I wouldn't bother you. I am very ill and need to rest. Could you call my office and tell them I won't be there today?" I did as she asked and left her to sleep while I went to work. At about 10 o'clock, I called her to find out about her condition, and she informed me that she was still not feeling well. I replied, "Well, I realized that I would have to go to Cleveland alone." When I got no answer, I broke off the conversation and dialed Adam's number to inform him about the change of plans. Adam suggested canceling the trip to Cleveland, as Julia would not be able to come, and instead, both couples could come to Chicago to meet me on Friday evening. Then we could spend Saturday shopping on the Magnificent Mile. If Julia felt better, we could have dinner together on Saturday night. I was thrilled with the idea and informed him that I would book a table for them at the Drake Hotel and have dinner with them at the Spaga restaurant across the street at 6 o'clock in the evening. I immediately canceled my flight, my hotel room in Cleveland, as well as all arrangements for a car and a hotel in Niagara Falls. It was disappointing, but sometimes plans change. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I called Julia to see how she was feeling and to ask if she could join us for dinner. Unfortunately, I received a busy signal and was busy preparing a presentation for Adam and Ben. By 5:30 p.m., I made another attempt to reach her but received a voicemail message. I left a message detailing our plans and then quickly walked out the door to meet the Hartleys at Spaga. When we were sitting at the table and enjoying cocktails before the meal, Adam's expression suddenly changed. He turned to me and said, "John, I hate to break the bad news, but you should know that Julia just entered the restaurant with another man. They're sitting behind you on your left, against the wall." With a heavy heart, I slowly turned around in my chair to look at her, and there she was, with none other than Douglas Simon. The sight of them together filled me with anger and resentment, emotions that I knew would never go away. In short, he had left my sister Barbara at the altar and later confessed that he did not want to get married. He quickly married another woman and had a child. Despite my belief that she was better off without him, Barbara is still suffering because of his betrayal. That's why I despise and hate him. But let's focus on the present. I was surprised, to put it mildly. I tried to speak, but all I managed was a stutter. The sympathetic expressions on everyone's faces confirmed their shock. Finally finding my voice, I was able to say, "Well, this is quite unexpected, isn't it?" It was clear that I couldn't continue the evening with them, pretending that I hadn't witnessed what we all saw. I invited them to continue their plans and suggested that we meet for breakfast the next morning at 9:30 a.m. in the hotel cafe. I'm sure I'll feel much better by then. Unfortunately, it's clear that Julia and I won't be able to join you for dinner tomorrow night. I deeply apologize and ask for your forgiveness, I said quietly. I hugged the women and men who were my old friends and headed to the place where my wife was sitting. I noticed that Adam was following me, reassuring me that everything would be fine, though I knew it wouldn't happen. I appreciated his concern for me. When we returned to the tense conversation at the table, I found myself in my room at the Drake Hotel. I had turned off my mobile phone at the time of registration but decided it was time to turn it on again. Julia had left a few messages, but like others in my position, I deleted them without listening. Ignoring the last voice message, I let the phone ring and sent it to voicemail, not wanting to hear what she had to say. After deleting the message, I turned off the phone again. On Saturday morning, I met with Adam and Ben to discuss our business relationship. I told them that I was expecting major changes in my life and was not sure what they might entail. I asked them to refrain from signing the new contract sent by Greg. I asked to be given time to deal with problems in my marriage and at work. Greg, as you know, is a close friend of Julia's father and her godfather. Perhaps there will be a better opportunity for you in the future if you can wait. If not, we'll reconsider the situation. Adam suggested, I perfectly understand what you're driving at, but honestly, I don't see anything wrong with you continuing your monthly contacts with Greg until my future becomes more certain. What do you say? I asked. Adam replied, we will do as you ask. Greg and I are working together only because of you, and if your circumstances change, we will always be there for you. Just let us know what needs to be done when the time comes. We are ready to support you in any case. Tears welled up in my eyes as I hugged them both tightly. At that moment, the ladies entered the restaurant. It's time for the women to persuade their husbands to go shopping. Caroline, Adam's wife, grinned mischievously and said, come on, darling, your credit card is a little cold, and I think it needs to be warmed up a little. Gloria, Ben's wife, added, I hope Ben's card will withstand the heat because today we will withdraw money from them so often that they may just melt. It's not every day that we manage to shop on the Magnificent Mile. Despite my feelings, I couldn't help but laugh at their playful banter and appreciated their efforts to cheer me up. I truly adored them for that. After exchanging hugs, they left. I considered going to the office to get some things in order but hesitated, deciding that Greg might be there on Saturday and Julia might expect me to show up. As a result, I decided not to go and planned to come to the office early on Sunday morning to figure out what needed to be done. I spent the rest of Saturday afternoon immersed in a book I had recently picked up. The next morning, I arrived at the office and dealt with several tasks. Before I left, I developed a plan for what I hoped to do on Monday morning. Back in the hotel room, with the Chicago Tribune newspaper, I started looking through apartment rental ads, realizing that I couldn't stay at the Drake indefinitely. I started calling and making appointments for Tuesday morning. When everything was ready, I relaxed and started watching football. The next morning, I met with my longtime lawyer, Roger, to discuss the possibility that he would represent me in the divorce case. Roger assured me, God knows, John, it won't be difficult for me to introduce you. I can't believe you're divorcing Julia. You really love her more than anyone I've ever known. I replied, Roger, the key word here is loved. It's in the past tense because I don't feel that way about her anymore. If you don't want to represent me, that's fine, but please don't represent Julia. Roger agreed, saying that he would prefer not to represent either of us. He suggested that I try to sort things out with Julia, but if that's not possible, then I should invite Jacob Easterman as my lawyer. He thought Jacob would be good at this task. Roger advised me to try to make peace with Julia before making final decisions. I thanked him for his recommendation but made it clear that I had no chance of reconciling with Julia since my feelings for her had changed. Then I met with Jacob, who assured me that all the necessary paperwork would be ready by Tuesday and that Julia would receive the lawsuit on Wednesday. After that, I visited the bank and received a cash receipt for half of our savings, leaving the remaining funds in our joint checking account to cover current expenses until the divorce process was completed. Julia and I had a predetermined financial arrangement. Every month, we contributed a fixed amount to cover the total running costs. In addition, each of us contributed a certain amount for food, entertainment, and the purchase of furniture and equipment. Over time, the fund to cover these expenses had grown significantly as we constantly contributed more than we spent. This fund remained untouched to pay bills during the divorce proceedings. In addition, each of us saved about $500 a month in a separate account to pay for vacations and holidays. After the divorce, I will withdraw my 50% share of the savings account. We had full control over our personal income and could invest and spend it as we saw fit. Our investment accounts were separate, managed by different brokers, and we were unaware of the value of each other's accounts. Similarly, we had separate plans. The only general financial information was the amount deposited monthly into our checking and savings accounts. I took the cash receipt to another local bank and decided to open new accounts for myself. I deposited $25,000 into my checking account and $155,000 into my new savings account. I also took care of additional financial details, such as insurance. That done, I went to the office to sort things out. As soon as I entered, Kelly, the secretary, informed me that Greg wanted to see me in his office right away. I thought, well, it started. He called me inside, saying, "Come in, John," and closed the door. After Julia's call, I was left perplexed. What happened? I told him the whole situation, and he asked me what I would do next. I said confidently, I'm going to file for divorce. After asking his opinion, he replied with a touch of arrogance, insisting that I should reconcile with my wife and not file for divorce if I wanted to stay at work. My choice was obvious: establish a relationship with my wife or face the consequences of being fired from my job. Go figure it out with Julia or consider yourself fired, Greg threatened. I pretended to be shocked and raised an eyebrow before answering, Greg, do you really think that my value to the company depends only on my personal life with Julia? Aren't my efforts and dedication obvious enough? Didn't I adhere to the company's rules and policies? Knowing Greg, I recorded our conversation on my phone. John, you are a valuable employee of the company. Your work ethic is impeccable, and you always follow the rules, Greg admitted. You played a role in the development of the company's policy, so I believe that you adhere to it. But Julia is my goddaughter, and I have to tell you that if you don't solve your problems with her, then I will have to fire you. Do you understand the gravity of the situation now? Greg asked. I realized that he was trying to put pressure on me but decided to turn the situation around and confront him. Although I restrained myself from smiling inwardly, I felt a sense of satisfaction. In a gloomy tone and with a pained expression on my face, I told Greg that he would have to break the news that I was ending my marriage with Julia. Although he looked stunned and disappointed, he eventually made the decision to fire me from my job. I asked him to assign a guard to accompany me to the office where I intended to pick up the remaining things. Anticipating the situation, I had already taken some things on Sunday. Greg and I had a long working relationship, so I knew him well. Arriving at my now former office, I selected only a few things to pack them in a small box taken from the pantry. As I was about to leave, Greg noticed a photo of Julia and me on our wedding day. She was standing there in her stunning wedding dress, and I couldn't help but feel sad. I have to admit that I didn't look so bad in a tuxedo either. Tears welled up in my eyes when I picked up our photo and whispered, I've always liked this frame. I carefully removed the back of the frame, put it in the box with my things, and threw the photo into the basket. As I turned to leave, I was greeted by Julia's shocked expression and tears streaming down her face. She clearly noticed how I got rid of the wedding photo and understood the consequences of my actions. In a low voice, she asked, Johnny, can we talk? I briefly paused my departure and replied, we have nothing to talk about, Julia. You've already betrayed me or are about to. You broke both the promises you made on our wedding day. You hurt me so deeply that you broke my heart, and you did something that made me stop loving you. As they say, you can't fix a broken heart. What should I do now? Do you really believe that I can forgive you for betraying me? Do you know how much I despise Douglas for what he did to Barb, and yet you cheated on me with him? It's unrealistic to think that our marriage can survive this. No, Julia, there's nothing more to discuss here. I left my workplace and left Julia's life. I called Adam Hartley and informed him that Julia and I were getting divorced and that I had been fired from Gray System Solutions because of this. I informed him that I was developing an advanced system security program that would surpass anything Gray currently provides. I explained that I needed a few months to finalize and implement it and asked if he would agree to stay on a monthly basis until Gray provided their new program. For the past 2 years, Greg has not allowed me to do programming, instead entrusting me with the maintenance of the system and solving all issues related to customer service. As a result, I've devoted my personal time to coding and am already close to completing the project. If I hadn't been fired, I planned to turn it over to Greg as soon as he could see improvements over his current program. Now that I'm no longer working there, I'll have the freedom to market it on my own. Adam noted that he would need to consult with his father before giving a final answer, but he was sure that they were ready to give me a few months to finalize. Judging by their assessment, they could implement this into their business. For days later, I was able to move from the hotel to a beautiful apartment. Although the monthly rent was very high, I had the financial reserves to last a few months. After moving, all my days were occupied with writing and testing code for 10 to 12 hours in a row. Despite knowing that the project would soon be ready to enter the market, I felt obliged to bring it to completion in order to live on. It was at this time that Julia received the divorce papers and repeatedly contacted me in the hope of talking about it. I've listened to all her voice messages, but I haven't found anything worth discussing with her. In one of the messages, she confessed, "Johnny, I have to admit that I might have thought about being with Douglas if you hadn't intervened, but I've never acted in that direction. I don't know what I was thinking, but I still love you. Could you give me a call?" She begged, "Johnny, I still love you, and I don't want to get divorced. Please call me," she continued. "Johnny, can't we find a way to get through this and stay together?" she pleaded. "Johnny, I miss you terribly." Feeling that I was tired of everything, I contacted Jacob and asked him to contact Julia's lawyer, warning him that I would seek a restraining order if her behavior did not change. Shortly after that, I received a message from Julia, "Johnny, I love you and I just want to fix everything and spend the rest of my life with you. I'm surprised that you're seeking a restraining order against me, but if that's what you think you need to do, then I'll respect your decision. This will be the last message I'll send you. I love you more than anything in the world, but I understand that the choice is now in your hands. I'm really sorry that I caused you so much pain that you can't even talk to me. My love for you is unshakable, and I am by your side when you are ready to lend a helping hand," Julia said sadly. As promised, I didn't receive any more messages or calls from her. The result was not what I expected. It was like the last nail in the coffin of our marriage. Even though we had not divorced yet, I was very sad to realize that it had come to this. I spent 3 stressful weeks working on my programs, devoting many hours to them every day. On Friday, just after lunch, Jacob called me. He informed me that we had a court hearing scheduled for next Wednesday morning with Judge Janice Caldwell. Jacob expressed his concern, mentioning that Judge Caldwell has a reputation for being a tough judge in divorce cases, often subjecting people to thorough processes before granting a divorce, if she gives one at all. Arriving at the courtroom, we found Julia and her lawyer there. Our case was reviewed within a few minutes after we entered the courtroom. After we took our seats, the bailiff called the hall to order. Everyone stood up when Judge Caldwell came in and took her seat. Greeting us as we sat down, she turned to me, the applicant in the divorce case, and asked if I wanted to drop the lawsuit and try to save my marriage. I respectfully declined, stating that I wanted to continue the case. Judge Caldwell looked slightly disapproving but eventually agreed with my decision. Then she turned to Julia and asked, "Mrs. Barton, do you agree with the decision to divorce, or would you prefer to try to reconcile with your spouse?" Without hesitation, Julia said, "Your Honor, I don't want a divorce. I love my husband, and I intend to save our marriage." When the judge considered the petition indicating irreconcilable differences as the basis for divorce, it became clear that the settlement agreement proposed by Mr. Barton was fair and devoid of any malicious intent usually found in such cases. The judge asked if there was a reason for such an unusual lack of hostility in the petition. "Your Honor, I bear her no ill will. I have no intention of harming her, and I am fully committed to achieving a just solution. I must admit that I no longer feel the feelings of love for her that I once felt," I explained, causing Julia to choke and let out a small sob. The judge intervened, expressing optimism that with the right support, the couple would be able to resolve their problems and reconcile. As a result, the judge appointed 3 joint sessions of marital counseling with a highly qualified psychotherapist. The court appoints 1 first session, then 3 individual sessions for each party, and 2 joint sessions. The only exception is if the consultant informs the court that the marriage cannot be saved, the judge announced and hit the gavel, announcing the start of the next case. I wanted to object, but Jacob stopped me and advised, "John, attend the first session and see if you change your mind. If not, tell the counselor clearly that you want to end the marriage and see what happens next." Unfortunately, the consultations turned into a disaster. Julia begged, apologized, and pleaded with me to reconsider the decision to divorce and try to rebuild our marriage. The consultant listened to me carefully, although he did not seem particularly sympathetic to my decision to end my marriage. He asked, "John, can you explain why you don't want to work on your marriage?" I replied, "Dr. Graham, let me share a story with you. To some, it may seem like a fairy tale, but it is not fiction. I was at my company's Christmas party when I saw a girl across the room. Have you ever experienced love at first sight? Because that's exactly what happened to me. My boss introduced his goddaughter Julia to me, and at that moment, I realized that she was the one I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. The sadness that had been in her eyes just a few minutes ago disappeared, replaced by a beautiful smile that won my heart. It seemed like we were made for each other as our relationship quickly developed into something passionate and intense. 3 months later, I decided to ask her to marry me, and from that moment, our love story began. I believed that we were perfect for each other, but with a sigh, I realized that maybe perfection is just an illusion. Despite this realization, I was determined to continue this journey with Julia by my side. Mr. Graham, for me, it was love at first sight. My feelings didn't develop gradually over time, they were instantaneous. This instant connection should give you some insight into my psychology, don't you think? If love can arise in an instant, then of course it can disappear just as quickly. Julia was dating another man, but I believe her when she says they didn't have intimacy. I suspect that the situation could have escalated if I hadn't intervened. She betrayed our marriage in every sense of the word. Going on a date with another man is a betrayal, no matter how you look at it. And even worse, the man she chose was Douglas, the scum of the earth, my sworn enemy. It wasn't just a random man. She knew how much I despised Douglas. She knew the whole sneaky story about how he offended my sister Barbara, but she decided to cheat with him anyway. To top it all off, they came to the holiest place in our relationship, the place where we first met, where I got down on one knee and asked her to become my wife. It was a place where we created countless memories together, where I imagined celebrating her first pregnancy and welcoming our first child. But when I saw her sitting with Douglas, his hand caressing her face as they raised their glasses in a toast and a smile played on her face, I realized that the love of my life was betraying me to my worst enemy. At that moment, my heart broke apart, and the love I felt for her began to evaporate. As I approached their table, I felt an emptiness growing in my heart. By the time I left the restaurant, that emptiness had consumed all the love for the woman who had once been my everything. All the love we once shared was gone. That's why I can't keep being married to her. Document. There is no love left, and I refuse to stay in a marriage where there is no love. It may sound cruel, but it's true. I finished my story sadly. Julia's tears touched my heart, but they couldn't change my feelings. I didn't love her anymore, and I needed to end our marriage. Julia, I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt you, but can you understand what I'm getting at? It won't be fair to you if we stay married and I don't love you. Dr. Graham said, our session is coming to an end today, but I think we've discussed everything that needed to be discussed. I am sure that with the help of individual consultations, we will be able to make progress and hopefully restore the relationship. I will recommend to the judge to continue these sessions. At that moment, I was furious. After listening to everything I've just said, there's no way I'm going to continue the consultations. It's ridiculous to think that this marriage has any chance of survival. If you consider it necessary to continue consultations, then do it with Julia and exclude me, I shouted and left the office, annoyed that someone could be so forgetful. A few days later, I received a letter from the court assigning me 3 individual consultations. After missing the first session, I was taken to court where Judge Caldwell found me in contempt and fined me $500. She warned me that if I missed the next consultation, I would be sent to prison. I told her emphatically that I would no longer attend consultations. True to my word, I missed the next meeting and was immediately taken by a policeman to the Cook County Jail. What a beautiful place, not? Every day a lawyer came to me, trying to convince me to attend a consultation, but I stubbornly refused. On the 3rd day, an unexpected visitor appeared. It was my former boss Greg, who had a short 15-minute visit. He expressed regret about my current situation and admitted that he did not support me when I needed it most. Greg said he had a solution to my problem if only I would give him the opportunity to help me deal with it. If you agree to undergo individual counseling, Judge Caldwell will release you from prison. After that, we can meet to discuss ways to resolve your situation. I just ask you not to forget about the possibility of returning to my job in the future, although you do not need to promise this, he offered. For the first time in a long time, I felt optimistic. Greg had always been a good friend and treated me fairly until the situation with Julia arose. I agreed to comply with his request and also committed myself to thinking about returning to work at Grace System Solutions. The judge scheduled my first individual session for the next day, and I was escorted home by a police officer who waited while I prepared for the meeting. I took a shower, shaved, and got dressed. Then he accompanied me to the session and was present until it ended. The session included a typical psychological study and a survey. I tried to be as accommodating as possible. At the end of the session, Dr. Graham escorted me to the exit and brought the officer up to date. It was noted that Mr. Ya showed willingness to cooperate and committed to attend the next session scheduled for a week later. Then the officer informed me that I could leave, but warned me that if I missed the next meeting, I would end up in front of Judge Caldwell again, and it was better to avoid this. The officer stressed the seriousness of Judge Caldwell's behavior when angry and advised me not to miss the upcoming meeting. I contacted Greg and arranged to meet him at my apartment the next day. We spent the whole morning discussing his proposed plan, making the necessary preparations, and then moved on to lunch. After the meal, we sat down at the table again to discuss my possible future at Grace System Solutions. I told Greg that although I had always appreciated him and cherished our friendship, I needed to prioritize my own interests. I reminded him of the time when I got my last promotion, and he advised me not to do programming. You once told me that my system maintenance and customer service skills are too valuable to spend on programming, but I have a passion for programming, Greg. I am developing an advanced security program that surpasses everything currently on the market by 4 generations. I assure you, this is a truly innovative development that can revolutionize security systems in our country. Given all the recent problems with hacking retail chains, my new program will make such hacks absolutely impossible. Believe me, it will change the situation for the better. I have only a few months left to test my program on real company data. I believe that the program will be ready for implementation in 3 to 4 months, I confessed to Greg. Have you already made an agreement with Adam about testing? Greg asked. I smiled and replied, Greg, I will never be able to deceive you. Yes, he agreed to try it. He is only doing this because of my friendship with him, and if my program proves successful, he will most likely leave you. Understanding the situation, Greg asked, how do you plan to get around the non-competition clause in your contract? The non-competition clause is invalid because I did not resign and was not fired for a valid reason. You fired me because I didn't want to solve my personal problems at work, so there is no problem with the non-competition clause, I replied. He chuckled and mentioned that he could fake problems at work if you wanted to, but quickly added that he hoped I would return to work for him. I chuckled at his remark, which seemed to annoy him. Greg, I said calmly, I recorded our conversation when you fired me. You confirmed that there were no work-related issues and that my dismissal was solely due to problems with Julia. I have evidence of this conversation on tape. Why did you feel the need to record it, John? Asked Greg. Because I know about your strong feelings for Julia and suspected that you would do everything possible to prevent me from divorcing her, I replied. Fair enough, Greg said and continued the conversation. I am confident that the new software I have developed will bring me great wealth, and I am ready to share this success with you, Greg, on certain conditions. I am ready to return to work for you on a permanent basis while maintaining my current responsibilities for working with clients, but I will no longer be responsible for system maintenance. You will need to hire a manager who will report directly to me, as this is closely related to the new program. I am sure that as soon as you master the new software, you will be delighted with the results. In the future, I plan to devote about 40% of my time to developing the program. Although I will work for you full-time and receive remuneration for creating my current and future programs, I will retain sole ownership of these programs. In exchange, I am ready to grant you an exclusive license to promote and sell my programs with a pre-agreed royalty rate that will be paid to me. I understand, Greg, that this may seem bold, but I am sure that when you are convinced of the potential of my work, you will find this agreement beneficial. Together, we have the opportunity to achieve great success. I agree to the terms set out in this offer and instruct our corporate lawyer to complete the transaction. It should be noted that if the agreement does not meet expectations, I reserve the right to terminate our agreement. In this case, I will ask you to change the royalty percentage to a more profitable one. Greg agreed. Unfortunately, I missed the last consultation, after which I was detained by an officer and taken to court in handcuffs. The officer warned me with a smirk, showing that I had been warned about the consequences of my actions. When Judge Caldwell entered the courtroom, I immediately noticed her fiery red complexion, steam coming out of her nostrils, and flames in her eyes. It was clear that she was angry. Mr. Barton, it looks like you've crossed the line again, she announced. I consider you disrespectful to the court, and you are sentenced to 30 days in prison." Julia, who was inexplicably present, suddenly intervened, pleading with the judge. "No, Your Honor, please reconsider," she begged. "I withdraw my objections to John's request for a divorce. Please satisfy him." When Judge Caldwell stated, "It's too late, darling. He's going to spend time in jail, period," I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. Saliva seemed to come out of her mouth when she said those words. Deciding to take matters into my own hands, I stood up and exclaimed, "Your Honor, I would like to address the court." The judge gave me a stern look and replied, "You have no right to address me directly. You have a lawyer for that." Feeling strong, I turned to Jacob and said firmly, "Jacob Lissman, you're fired. From now on, I will represent myself." With renewed confidence, I headed to the bench, ready to defend my point of view. Julia's lawyer also agreed to the request. "What's the matter, Mr. Barton?" the judge asked. "Your Honor, I would like to request a short meeting in your office to resolve this issue once and for all. I believe that if we hold this meeting, we will be able to come to a solution that will satisfy all interested parties," I said. The judge agreed and said, "Good. The lawyers will meet with me in my office in 10 minutes. I'm taking a short break." When we gathered in the judge's office, I asked that the meeting not be recorded in the minutes. The judge hesitated, but I interrupted her before she could reply. "Your Honor, I have reason to believe that there are issues that neither you nor Julia's lawyer would like to put on public display, so I ask once again that this be done off the record," I suggested. She looked at me for a long time and then nodded, asking the court recorder to leave the room. "Very well, Mr. Barton, finish your speech." "Let's listen to him," she said. "First of all, Your Honor, I don't want anyone to get hurt during this process. Please believe me, I have reason to believe that there has been a judicial violation here. I don't want you to get hurt and for your career to be ruined," I began. "I also don't want Julia's parents' marriage to break up, and I don't want Julia to be offended by anything. Although I no longer have feelings for her and don't want to be married to her, I also don't want her world to collapse. It is quite obvious that there is evidence of your connection with Julia's father, which means that you should step away from this case. The evidence is indisputable and quite obvious. Although I can present this evidence and testify if necessary, I would prefer to avoid this path. I would prefer to present this information to the Judicial Council, but I hesitate to do so. I don't want to cause any more harm to everyone involved in this. Julia will be deeply hurt, and I'm not sure that your marriage will withstand such a blow. My only intention is to complete the divorce without causing unnecessary pain." I turned to Julia's lawyer, hoping to get his opinion. "What do you think?" I asked. He looked at Judge Caldwell and said, "Your Honor, I have always admired your commitment to saving the marriages that can be saved. You were quite tough in some situations. Forgive me for being blunt, but I understood your reasons. If Mr. Barton's testimony is indeed confirmed, I will be upset to learn that you had an affair and even more disappointed that you did not drop the case. Like him, I wish you no harm. I think you should grant him a divorce." Turning to me, he added, "Mr. Barton, all I ask is that you sit down with Julia at the negotiating table and listen to what she has to say. You told the consultant that your heart is broken, and I sympathize with this pain. It is important to understand that her heart also hurts. Please give her a few minutes of your time. Your Honor, if you approve the divorce, there is no need to divulge all this outside of this room," Julia's lawyer said. When we reconvened in the courtroom, the divorce was approved, and the decision on the division of property was finalized. Each of us kept our investment accounts and received 50% of our savings. It was decided that the current account would cover all bills until the end of the divorce process, and after it, Julia would retain ownership of the house, agreeing that she could live in it indefinitely without any obligations. In case of a sale, the net proceeds would be divided equally between us. The judge overturned the original sentence of 30 days in prison and instead imposed a fine of $500, which I immediately paid. It was obvious that Julia needed to maintain her reputation, so I agreed to meet her in person in a room adjacent to the courtroom. Julia apologized once again, expressing confusion about her actions. She assured me that she would seek the advice of a psychologist until she could sort out her behavior. Despite her plea for forgiveness and declaration of love, I no longer had the same feelings for her. I hugged her before I left the room, and I heard her sobs echo down the hall. Over the next 6 weeks, I focused on developing a new security program, almost ready to implement it into Adam and Ben's system. About a week before my trip to Cleveland, Julia called me with news. She decided to sell the house and received an offer of $555,000. Julia wanted to give me a chance to buy it before accepting the offer. She offered to sell me the house for $280,000 so that I could outbid the other offer. I refused, saying that I did not need the house. I instructed Julia to proceed with the sale and send my share of the proceeds to my lawyer. He will draw up all the necessary documents for the sale and transfer the money to my account. Then I asked her why she was selling the house. She explained that she was leaving the city for a new job and needed to start her life from scratch. She also mentioned that she had found out about her father and the judge, and said that although she knows I do not wish harm to anyone, it still hurts her. I wished her good luck at her new job and said goodbye. 2 weeks later, the deal was completed. When I joined Adam and Greg's company, I arrived with my security software package ready for testing and implementation. Adam greeted me with warm hugs, expressing his excitement about the new system and his impatience to get to work as soon as possible. He introduced me to the secretary, John, and then to Julia. Confused, I looked at Adam and asked what was going on. He grinned and explained that Julia was their new administrator. You probably know how talented she is, so I'm sure it won't be difficult for you to implement the new security package with her, Adam said. Although I was caught off guard at first, I informed him that I would need a computer workstation to complete some tasks for the rest of the day. I would work with Julia to some extent, but my main focus would be on preparing the package for installation and implementation. It was important that the computer had internet access. Having calmed myself down, I must say that the day turned out to be quite pleasant. I've always admired Julia for her wit and intelligence. Julia remained as humorous, beautiful, and funny as ever. It was a pleasant day spent with my best friend, wife, and lover. Julia's efforts to be close to me, communicate with me, and subtly touch me did not go unnoticed. I couldn't help but feel the impact of her actions. I missed her more and more every day. At 5:30 p.m., we said goodbye to each other with heavy hearts, saying, "See you tomorrow." She left. Sitting in my hotel room, I considered my next steps and finally decided to take a bold one. I opened my laptop and expertly hacked into the company's computer system. It is common practice for programmers to create a backdoor just in case. I managed to get access to the personnel documents and found Julia's address. Then I went to the liquor store, bought a bottle of her favorite wine, and went to her apartment. When the doorman asked about my visit, I confidently stated that I had come to see Julia. I told him I'd come to see Julia Barton, but she wasn't expecting me. He tried unsuccessfully to call Julia's apartment, and I assumed she must have gone out to dinner. I asked if I could wait for her, and he directed me to a small break room located to the side of the lobby. Soon, Julia came in with a man who hugged her and kissed her as they walked to the elevator. The doorman, suddenly realizing my presence, approached them. He spoke to Julia and gestured in my direction. As I walked toward them, I heard Julia begging, "Oh my God, no, please no, no, no." Well, it started again. "I always seem to be able to interrupt your dates, Julia," I said with a hint of apology. "I'm sorry I showed up uninvited, but of course you're glad I came," I added, handing the man the bottle of wine. "Have a nice evening, you too." As I was leaving, Julia hurried after me, begging, "Johnny, please don't go anymore." But I continued on my way. Back at the hotel, I immediately sent Julia an email to her workplace. In the message, I expressed my surprise to see her in Adam's office. It quickly dawned on me that she must have quit her job, sold her apartment, moved to Cleveland, and joined Ben and Adam's team to be by my side. It may sound presumptuous, but it seemed to me that you wanted the opportunity to reunite with me and maybe be together again. I suspect Greg may have influenced you by informing you of my location and projects. Although it doesn't shock me, I don't like it when he interferes in my life. Despite this, I was sincerely glad to see you. I must admit I missed our friendship. Today's time spent with you brought back good memories and made me feel satisfied. I didn't want our conversation to end, so I made a spontaneous decision to take a bottle of wine with me to continue our conversation outside the office. I needed time to gather my thoughts before continuing, but I was stunned when I saw you with another man. I felt confused and unsure. It seems contradictory that you were making efforts to rebuild a relationship with me and at the same time you were already involved in a romantic relationship during your short stay in Cleveland. This situation leaves me with only two possible explanations. Either you are really not interested in resuming our relationship, or there is something else that I do not know about. Regardless of whether you stick to the idea of being with me or dating other men, I'm getting out of this situation. I doubted my decision to divorce you, but your behavior convinces me that it was the right choice. It pains me to realize that I almost bought into your false concern. It's quite obvious that you only care about yourself. I hope that in the future you find true satisfaction and happiness. Please don't try to resume a relationship with me. You seem to think that I have no place in your life. I wish you all the best, Julia. I also sent another email about installing the software, attaching a file with detailed instructions on how to activate the security program. A 2-word password is required to access the file and the security system. If you remember our last meeting at Spia, it should be easy. If you can't remember those 2 words, maybe Adam can help you because he heard them too. The passwords, in fact, were like broken promises. These 2 words are necessary to access the security system. I may have been a little immature, but who cares? Every time you log in, you will remember how you neglected our marriage. I installed the package on the server and, following the instructions, you just need to activate it and set additional access codes and passwords for different users. Everything is described in detail in the instructions. If you have any problems in the future, contact Greg. He will connect you with the team that helped me work on the program since I will no longer work there. Good luck. I finished the letter. Sometimes men who have ended a relationship with a deceitful spouse can find a younger, more attractive, alluring, intelligent, and insightful partner than the one they left. This new partner may be more inclined to intimacy and remain faithful indefinitely. I thought I had found such a woman in Julia before she betrayed our marriage, but unfortunately, it turned out not to be the case. After leaving GRY Systems Solutions, I found myself depressed, despite still receiving significant royalties from the licenses for the security packages that Greg sold. This money no longer mattered to me. My self-esteem had hit rock bottom, and I was struggling with a lack of self-confidence, which was completely new to me as I had always been confident in the past. Realizing that I had a problem, I took the necessary steps to seek help. I started going to a psychologist, and after a few sessions, I began to feel like myself again. I continued therapy, though not with Dr. Graham, and gradually felt that I was on the right track again. I started dating, but nothing serious came of it. When my finances got in order and my life improved, I decided to accept everything as it is and not rush to fall in love again. It's been 5 years since I last saw Julia. I didn't want to see her or hear anything about her. I remarried a wonderful woman who gave birth to 2 sons whom I adore. Recently, Adam told me how things are with Julia. She is deeply in love with her new husband, with whom she has a 1-year-old daughter, but not everything is as good as it seems. This man, Nick, her husband, is very sociable. Nick has a predilection for a wild life and even brings young women home after visiting nightclubs. Julie tried to fight with her husband, but nothing came of it. Neither Greg, her godfather, nor her influential father could help her with this problem. They only advised Julia to be patient because Nick's influential father had an advantage even over Greg. Julia's life turned into a nightmare before her eyes. Her husband entered into intimate relationships with other women after marriage, and she could not do anything about it. When I found out about it, I couldn't help but smile. Julia deserved this kind of life. After all, karma exists. Story 2. When I pulled into our garage, I was overcome by a wave of anxiety. I knew I'd be late and Jim would worry. I mentally rehearsed my excuse, trying to make it sound plausible before facing him face to face. I never intended to engage in a debauched life, but 6 months later, I discovered that I was addicted to the passion that my lover ignited in me. Despite my love for my husband, Samuel dominated me, and I couldn't resist him. I tried to break off my relationship with him but couldn't get free. I tried many times. He is incredibly seductive and knows exactly how to manipulate me, forcing me to go against my own values and decisions every time. If Jim finds out about this, he will most likely be very upset. I was hoping that if things got really bad, I could convince him not to divorce me and forgive me. I even developed a strategy for this case. That's how low I've sunk. During the 6 months of my affair, I became a different person and took all measures not to lose Jim, my beloved husband. I was afraid all the time that he would find out the truth and throw me out of his life and home, but I was sure that he would never reveal my secret. I tried to get intimate with him whenever he showed interest, even when I wasn't in the mood, because my love for him was so strong. I really love him, at least sometimes. From time to time, I feel guilty and dream of turning back time and preventing my attraction to Sam from developing into a physical relationship. I suddenly remembered that before I went to work in the morning, I sprayed myself with Jim's favorite perfume. Fortunately, I managed to avoid suspicion by coming up with a story that I accidentally spilled cleaning agent on myself when I was looking for Kleenex in the closet at work. Jim completely believed my explanation. After taking one last look around, I left. When I got home, I stopped at the front door and looked around the neighborhood for Jim's pickup truck. To my surprise, it was parked on the street in front of our neighbor's house and not in its usual place. Something was wrong. He usually parked in our driveway, but today was different. Looking out the window, I saw Giselle checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. It was a tiring day for me, and her tardiness only made my disappointment worse. This was becoming a regular occurrence, not an occasional delay. If she really was where she said she was, I wouldn't mind, but the reality was different. This had been happening for months, and now it was impossible to ignore. I tried various ways to win her back, but she showed no interest in reconciling with me. Despite knowing about her affair, I decided to keep it a secret, believing that she should end it herself so that our relationship would have a chance. I tried traditional gestures like dinners, movies, and gifts, but I also got creative by making a unique trinket shelf for her. One Friday, I surprised her by picking her up from work and sending her on a romantic weekend out of town. She wandered where she wanted, ignoring my attempts to start a conversation about our relationship. The weekend I spent in the city started with her getting mad at me, but by the end, I thought we had made progress. But the following week showed the opposite. Disappointed, I started criticizing her working hours and work, which only made her even angrier. Our intimacy decreased significantly, then even more, and finally even more. What used to happen regularly several times a week and at least 3 times on weekends has now become a rarity. It's been a week and a half since the last intimate moment and 2 weeks since the last lovemaking. Despite my awareness of the situation, she didn't seem to notice the lack of intimacy between us. I discovered her infidelity 5 months ago, but she successfully evaded my questions and made unconvincing arguments in favor of why she takes a shower at work. She didn't know that I was following her that day and knew the real reason she took a shower, and it had nothing to do with her job. When I found out the truth, my heart broke, but my love for her was still strong enough that I wanted her back. She was the woman I dreamed of having children with, the one who took over my heart from the moment we met. Now, the task ahead did not seem too difficult to me. I did not think long about how she would react to my departure, imagining how she would seek comfort from her lover, and together they would laugh at me, the fool they've been playing all this time. How could a husband compete with a lover who didn't have to do the usual work for his wife? How could a husband ignore his wife's infidelities with her lover and not try to honestly return her? I did everything I could, but I couldn't. I'm going to have to tell her tonight that I need to get out of town right away. It's not the first time I've used this excuse, but it's definitely the last. You'll probably wonder why I didn't meet her face to face. If I had told her that I had caught her, she would only regret getting caught. I caught her, but not because she was going to leave me. I hoped to get her back without acknowledging her betrayal, believing that it would prove her love for me. But now, it became clear to me that my plan had failed. She didn't know that all my things were packed in a truck, my bank accounts were divided, my job was abandoned, and a new job offer came from a friend on the other side of the country. I even arranged for the cancellation of the mobile phone. I paid off the debt under the previous tariff plan, agreeing to a fine to avoid calls from her in the future. When my old phone was only a week away from expiring, I felt relieved. My savings flowed smoothly into my new employer's savings plan, and the retirement plan with a cash balance remained safe. Despite the benefits, quitting the job was bittersweet. I had strong connections with my colleagues, and I liked the job itself. It was difficult to part with them, the employer, and the clients. After much thought and effort, I came to a difficult decision that Giselle completely ignored. She was too engrossed in her novel to notice that she had pushed me away, or maybe she just didn't care. In the end, it didn't matter anymore. The divorce papers will be delivered to Giselle next Friday when she will either be at work or with her lover. You may ask, am I really leaving her? Yes, I'm leaving. The pain of facing her infidelity is too much to bear. I know that now that we are taking action, she will regret her actions. I was scared of the thought of having to beg and ask her for forgiveness. I didn't want to seem desperate, like a pathetic beggar begging her for at least some crumbs of affection. All I wanted was for her to understand how much I love her and for her to remember the love we once shared. I wanted her to understand what a mistake she had made by leaving me for someone else. But despite all my efforts, I lost her to another man, a man who I knew wasn't right for her, who I knew didn't treat her with the love and respect she deserved. I could only hope that eventually she would see his true face, that she would regret her decision to leave me. I knew that the pain of losing me would hit her hard, especially when the divorce papers were handed over. That's when she'll see the truth, that she made a mistake by leaving me, and when that realization came to her, I hoped she would come back to me begging for forgiveness. Up to this point, I had planned to call her every night as usual, in the hope that she would not realize that I was using the phone at the motel or would be too worried that I was not using my cell phone. I assumed she wouldn't even notice because she always looked too preoccupied to have a real conversation with me. I didn't understand what she wanted from me. I couldn't understand why she started an affair and why she was continuing it, and I wasn't sure how she really felt about me. It was clear to me that she couldn't love me the way I once loved her before all this chaos started. If she really loved me, she would never have gotten involved with another man. But she had been dating him for several months and was not going to stop despite all my attempts to get her back. I eventually accepted defeat. The reality was obvious, he won, and I lost. Disappointed and angry, I started making up a fake story to hide my emotions when Giselle came to the front door. I retreated to the kitchen and got a cold beer, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I desperately needed a distraction. Trying to calm my racing thoughts, it was extremely important for me not to spoil my plan right now. After consulting with a lawyer, I knew what the court would require for our divorce. I had a feeling that Giselle would take this news with relief because it seems that she has already moved away from our relationship. I can almost guarantee that she will ask her lover to move in with her as soon as the divorce papers are ready next week. I tried to close the doors of the cupboards and drawers, preparing for the coming changes. A casual glance from her side would not have revealed the emptiness that now filled my closet and dresser. I wondered briefly what she would feel if she discovered this emptiness. Would she feel anything at all? How would she react if she saw that among the remaining clothes there is only the one she gave me? When she entered the house, she hugged me with a smile. I turned my head, allowing her to kiss me on the cheek, a gesture that has become all too familiar lately. She didn't mention it before, and she didn't mention it today. More than 2 weeks have passed since our last intimate meeting. She clearly did not notice the lack of intimacy between us, absorbed in the passion she must have received from her lover. "How was your day?" I asked, feigning interest in her well-being but really just playing the role of a loving husband she can rely on. "Everything was fine," she replied, her concern about my obvious distress forced and insincere. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Her answer was automatic. "Yes, I have to go to work again. I'll be gone for a week." "I'll leave in the morning," I said, studying her for any hint of a reaction. When she started to smile, I noticed how she quickly changed her expression to a more serious one. "Oh, honey, on Saturday?" "You have to go tomorrow," she said anxiously. Despite her words, her eyes betrayed the truth. She seemed relieved that I would be gone. It was obvious that she was glad of this, perhaps looking forward to spending more time with her lover. "Yes, it's going to be a long week. The work has already finished, and I need to monitor the construction," I explained. I felt relieved that she accepted my lies so easily, without getting angry like before. I've learned to answer briefly and simply, unlike the detailed explanations she's been giving me for months. For me, it was a sign that something was wrong. Her excuses became too specific, which aroused suspicion. One day I had to leave for work, and she did not protest as before, which seemed strange to me. Soon after that, I found out about her affair, and everything fell into place. We had dinner and relaxed in front of the TV, she in her usual armchair, I on the couch. I did not lose hope that at the last moment she would change her mind and would not allow me to continue the path I had chosen. In the morning, after a couple of hours, it became clear that this was just wishful thinking. The realization hit me like a brick. We had lost everything. She sat there, ignoring me, never once meeting my gaze. It was like I was invisible to her while she was mindlessly watching TV. I could see that her thoughts were absorbed by her lover and their plans for the week ahead. If only she knew that tomorrow I would be gone forever. And as I sat and watched her watching TV, the weight of my decision weighed on me. He has no idea I'm going to have a whole week with Sam. We can spend the night at my place or at his place. We're going to have a lot of intimate moments, and every night he will invite me to dinner and dancing. I shouldn't think so, but Jim's trip will be exciting for me. He will leave, and Sam will be at my disposal. It's going to be amazing. My plan for the last incredible week just got even better. Go ahead for next week. As soon as Jim gets home, I can finally forget Sam and focus on my relationship with Jim. Everything will fall into place. In the evening, I tried to start intimacy with Jim but found that he was peacefully snoring. He was fast asleep again. His work has been grueling for the last few months, but I couldn't help but wonder why he hadn't had an intimate relationship with me for so long. An alarming thought suddenly occurred to me: maybe he was cheating on me with someone else. I wondered if I had missed any signs that he might have found out about my infidelity and cheated on me in retaliation. Watching him sleep, I didn't notice any signs. I was sure he loved me, and yet I began to doubt my infidelity again, wondering why I was still connected to Sam. He showered me with attention, took me dancing, was pleasant in bed, and resembled Jim in size, but it was the little things that Sam did that made me want to be with him. Jim loved me, and it was obvious in our intimate moments. I appreciated the difference. Sam and I have a passionate chemistry that makes me feel fulfilled in more ways than one. He not only satisfies my physical needs, but also takes care of me emotionally. I like our evenings together, whether it's dinner at a restaurant or dancing all night. Sam is always attentive and caring, and with him, I feel like the most important woman in the world. When we return to his house or to his hotel room, I want to express my gratitude for the incredible experience that we shared. Despite the amazing time we spent together, I can't shake the feeling that I'm moving away from Jim. Perhaps it's time to put an end to this passionate affair. I am horrified by the thought that he will find out about my infidelity and may leave me or harm Sam, or worse, do both. Lately, I've noticed that Jim is making extra efforts to be a devoted husband to me, and this is causing me a nagging fear. Could it be that he knows about my infidelity and is trying to outdo my lover? I quickly dismissed this disturbing thought. If Jim finds out the truth, I know he will react impulsively and could put Sam in danger. It scares me to think that I'll have to bail Jim out if he acts recklessly. I didn't know how Jim would react when he found out about my cheating, but I was sure he would leave me right away. This week marked the end of my relationship with Sam. Despite the fact that I liked them, I knew it was time to focus on my husband and our plans to start a family. When I woke up in the morning in an empty bed, I felt anxious and afraid. I reassured myself that Jim probably left without saying goodbye so as not to disturb my sleep. Jim, my loving husband, took care of me, noticing my fatigue and offering to sleep longer. Although his call that evening was pleasant, it couldn't compare to the fact that he was at home with me. After talking to him, I realized that Sam was already on his way here. That night, I had plans to go on a date with Sam, and most likely we would end up either at his place or at mine. I always had a mobile phone with me, and Jim often called me on it. Despite the fact that Jim looked preoccupied during our conversation, I realized that most likely his mind was occupied with work. When he had to leave town, he usually concentrated on work, and he hardly had time to think about being separated from me. This arrangement suited both of us. I accepted and understood his need to prioritize work. At such moments, I was ready for Sam's arrival. When he knocked on the door, I left the garage door open so he could drive in, close it, and walk to the back door of the terrace. I was sitting completely naked on the kitchen counter and waiting for him. This time, his appearance didn't send a chill down my spine because I knew perfectly well what was waiting for me as soon as he opened the door and saw me like this. "Giselle, are you here?" His voice, deep and commanding, nevertheless provoked a response in me, causing a familiar feeling to stir inside. When he entered the room and looked at the sight that opened up to him, the look in his eyes spoke volumes, igniting a fire in me that made me even more passionate than before. "I'm here, waiting, Sam. Can we settle some business before we go to dinner and dance?" "It seems to me that I need it," I confessed, desire clearly audible in my voice. It was clear that I had lit a spark in him too. "Oh, Giselle, you're so beautiful," he whispered, his words filled with lust and thirst. His hands deftly fingered the buttons of his shirt, his lips were wet with desire. The desire in his eyes was unmistakable, and that was a key factor in why I let this affair go on for so long. On the other hand, Jim hadn't looked at me with such passion in a long time. He was always so rude to me. Sam was grinning at my condescension, a freedom I could never experience with Jim. There was something about Sam that made me feel comfortable enough to play along with his teasing. In the end, we took a shower together and then went to dinner. Despite the fact that I didn't like Sam, I mentioned that this would be our last week together. Despite this, he was still able to ignite a wild and reckless side in me. I never thought about the consequences of my actions. I didn't think that my behavior could jeopardize my husband's love for me. I was just caught up in the moment, craving the thrill and forbidden pleasure that Sam gave me. During dinner, we were sitting in a dimly lit booth in the last row, and Sam couldn't resist touching me. After dinner, he took me to a lively elite club for dancing. His hands were on my back, pulling me closer to him. I could feel the warmth spreading between us, igniting a fire inside me. At that moment, all thoughts of guilt or consequences disappeared, replaced by a primal desire that consumed me. As the music swirled around us, I surrendered to the passion that engulfed us on the dance floor, losing myself in the forbidden pleasure of the moment. It was a dangerous game we were playing, but at that moment, I didn't care. I was lost in the ecstasy of dancing, reveling in the thrill of the forbidden. Sam's hands were on my back, making me wonder what Jim would think if he witnessed this intimate gesture. The image of my husband quickly disappeared when Sam's actions came to the fore. I noticed that several women nearby were watching us with envious glances, and a small minority were looking disapprovingly. Later that night, back in his cozy bed, Sam made passionate love to me. As he continued to please me for the third time, my phone suddenly rang, forcing me to answer the call with a silent gesture toward Sam. "Hi, it's me. I'll be back later than I expected, but I wanted you to know, my husband told me." "How was the trip?" I asked, quite calmly. He replied, "What time do you have to work tomorrow?" I kept asking questions so that he wouldn't guess that I was alone. "It's very early. I'm going to bed now. We'll talk tomorrow. Love you." "Good night," my husband said goodbye to me. Sam was distracting me while I was on the phone with Jim, so I missed his words about love. My thoughts were abruptly interrupted when Sam increased his pace. I was engrossed in my pleasure, and thoughts of Sam and his skill occupied my thoughts for the rest of the night. It was a new experience for me. I felt very seductive while Sam was making love to me, and I was talking to Jim on the phone. The next week passed quickly, and Sam spent his evenings at my house. During the day, we most often made passionate love and then had dinner at a restaurant. After pampering ourselves with intimate moments to the point of exhaustion, we fell asleep until it was time to wake up and start the day. A sense of guilt crept into my soul as I lay there, a married woman tied up with a man who wasn't my husband. The feeling of excitement I was experiencing was addictive, igniting a fire passion in me throughout the week. But deep down, I knew that Friday would mark the end of our illicit affair. I made the decision to end my relationship with Sam, take a weekend off, and prepare to meet Jim. I needed to make amends for my infidelity and assure Jim of my love for him. I arrived at my new home early in the evening, driving faster than I probably should have. I exceeded the speed limit, trying to push the wreckage of my failed marriage as far as possible. Terry, my longtime friend, and his wife have built a successful business through hard work and dedication over the years. He has been aggressively reaching out to me, trying to convince me to join the team by sharing ideas in letters, emails, and phone calls. He attended my wedding, carried the coffin at my father's funeral, and has been a close friend since high school. His wife, Pam, was a wonderful woman with a strong sense of self-worth. I couldn't help but compare her to my wife, Giselle, and wish she had the same loyalty and devotion as Pam. Pam's eyes always reflected deep love for her husband, Terry, and they never wavered in their devotion. Unlike her, I haven't seen that spark in Giselle's eyes for at least 6 months. In my new position, I will be engaged in programming. I have strong skills in this field, as evidenced by the fact that after graduating from university, I was noticed by such large companies as Microsoft and Sunday. My master's thesis in college was about my passionate programming project, which I had been developing for some time. I decided to share this project with Terry as it was nearing completion. This eventually led to my involvement in Terry and Pam's business. Now that the divorce is over, for the first time in my life, I expect to receive a substantial income. Over the past few months, I've been carefully thinking through every detail to rid myself of Giselle at the right moment. She no longer deserved to participate in my plan or the success it promised. I've put up with her infidelity for too long, but now the fruits of my perseverance have finally appeared. The realization of this suddenly hit me, causing a storm of emotions. I felt a mixture of loss, anger, and overwhelming sadness. I couldn't help but wonder why I was never enough for her. The questions remained, but I didn't want to hear any more excuses or explanations from her. Our work was completed at dawn on Monday morning. I arrived at my new job, where I was greeted with unexpected warmth. Terry introduced me to the team, a group of 14 people who radiated kindness and positivity. There were 3 men and 11 women among them, not counting Terry, Pam, and me. Despite the lack of a visible need for a hero, I was accepted as if I were one, ready to save the day. I was grateful to them for their help in arranging my new living space. After all the chaos associated with the move, I felt relieved when I found a place that I could call my own. As I settled into my new environment, I found that I was most focused on my work. The tasks absorbed me and distracted me from thinking about Giselle. I was determined to move forward and not dwell on the past. Despite the hectic schedule, I was grateful to Terry and Pam for their support. Thanks to their efforts, the transition period went much more smoothly than I expected. As I unpacked the last of my things, a sense of peace came over me. My new home became a refuge, a place where I could start life with a clean slate and leave the past behind. I was ready to embrace this new beginning and see where it would take me. I couldn't believe my luck when I came across a 3-bedroom house. It had everything I could ever dream of, and besides, I didn't have to pay rent. I only had to spend one night in a motel before I moved in. Surprisingly, I almost immediately felt at home. Pam and Terry, my new neighbors, welcomed me with open arms, inviting me to dinner twice that week. They quickly realized the difficulties I faced in my personal life. Pam took on the role of a caring mother hen, constantly fussing around me and trying to ease any difficulties I had, and Terry patiently watched her actions. She was a rare gem, always taking care of me. She took care of me and looked after me, even trying to date me. It took Terry and me a lot of effort to get her to calm down. I wasn't interested in any other relationship at the moment. I needed to finalize the divorce and find time for myself to figure out what I really wanted in life. Dating wasn't a priority for me in the near future. On Thursday, my lawyer called me and informed me that the next day we would be handing over Giselle's documents at her work. Everything was settled, and the bailiff would deliver the papers to her by noon. My lawyer also mentioned that she has some interesting DVDs from the last week that might be useful to me. It looks like Giselle and her lover are up to something bad. Despite the anticipation of what was coming, I knew that I could trust my lawyer and deal with the situation effectively. She was a first-class lawyer known for her knowledge and success in the city and even in the state. I was comforted by her confidence, and I knew that I was in good hands. The next evening, I was looking forward to her news. Other lawyers trembled at the mere mention of her name. As an opponent's lawyer in the brutal world of legal battles, she was an absolute predator, a force to be reckoned with. Her reputation was second to none. So it was a stroke of luck that I was able to enlist her support. Initially hesitant, my lawyer, Amanda, was convinced when I revealed the truth about Giselle's actions and infidelity. After learning that Giselle had betrayed our marital vows and was not interested in reconciliation, as well as discovering her secret lover, I convinced Amanda to take up my case. Amanda insisted that I hire her as a lawyer. Over time, I learned that Sam had caused marriages to break up more than once, but he always managed to avoid the consequences of infidelity and divorce. Amanda was burning with the desire to confront Sam, a man so captivating that even the devil would pale in comparison with his attractiveness. It became obvious that Sam not only preyed on others but also forced his victims to behave more and more risky, eventually leading them on a path resembling prostitution. He used women to provide his company with more business, repay debts, and provide other services. I knew Giselle hadn't seen that side of him yet, but I was sure she would see it over time if she continued to spend time with him. I also knew that eventually Giselle would regret getting involved with him. Unfortunately, by the time she realizes this, it will be too late for me to come to her rescue. Sam acted consistently. He chose women who were vulnerable in terms of appearance, self-confidence, or behavior. It was one of those times when he focused on them, spending time trying to get to know them, cheer them up, have an intimate relationship with them, and then becoming their lover, manipulating them into working for him. He could be smooth, that's for sure. Amanda desperately wanted to teach him a lesson, and it seemed that my marriage would be the instrument of his downfall. The week dragged on, and every night when I called Giselle, I had a hard time pretending to be interested. By Thursday evening, I realized that this would be my last call to her. I also knew that she would do her best to contact me tomorrow after she was served. Fortunately, my old mobile phone would no longer be in use by then. Jim called me on Thursday and looked depressed. I also felt remorse all week while enjoying my date with Sam. I've been thinking about how to end it, but it shouldn't have come to that. On Thursday, I felt a sense of loss, although I couldn't pinpoint exactly what was bothering me. I had a feeling that something was wrong in my world. It was like an inner feeling, a nagging feeling of anxiety that I couldn't get rid of. The atmosphere between us had also changed. Jim seemed detached, almost relieved, as we talked, but there was tension in the air. He called me, but it was as if he expected me to do the talking myself, and when we said goodbye, his answer was cold and final. Looking back, I realized that I had to fight to keep him around. I should have apologized to him and not let him go on that trip. They say that hindsight is 20/20, and now I understand the truth of this statement. I pushed my worries to the back of my mind and hung up, gathering the courage to tell Sam that our time together was coming to an end. I needed to get this over with before my husband returned in a few days. I wanted to make sure that there were no traces of Sam left on me or in me, no smell, no remnants of evidence. That evening, the phone call distracted me a lot from my thoughts, but in the end, I dozed off. It was Friday, and I was at work when suddenly, just before lunch, everything changed in an instant. I heard a man in an ill-fitting dark brown suit call my name, his gaze stern as he approached me. "Giselle Hartman, what's the matter?" I asked. "Yes, can I help you?" I answered quickly. "You've been sued," he said, and my world collapsed around me. I didn't know what I was being sued for, but I knew something was terribly wrong. Without even looking at the envelope he handed me, he turned around and left. In a panic, I called Jim. He always knew how to get out of difficult situations. I trusted my husband to solve this issue for me. I tried to call him, but to no avail. When I tried to contact him via speed dial on my mobile phone, I received an alarming message that Jim's number was no longer in service. Worried, I found his number in the list of subscribers and dialed it manually, hoping that it was just a technical glitch in the phone company. I was greeted by the same message again. A feeling of fear gripped me, a cold shiver running down my spine, causing a wave of anxiety. In a moment of panic, I made a decision and contacted Jim's boss, Steven Sedgwick, also known as Steve. "I can't get through to Jim. Do you know where he's staying?" I asked. "Hi, Giselle, this is Steve. Jim doesn't work here anymore. His last day was last Friday. He found another job and moved to a permanent place of residence," Jim's boss replied. I was stunned and sat in disbelief, holding the phone to my ear. Did Jim quit, as he left? Sitting at my desk and not knowing what to do next, I felt a wave of uncertainty wash over me. I realized that I had embarrassed myself in front of Jim's former boss. The fact that even his own wife didn't know what was going on with him made me look stupid in front of all outsiders. The brown envelope looked ominous, like a snake ready to attack. When I finally plucked up the courage to open it, I was confronted with the devastating consequences of my betrayal. I have lost the man I love, my husband. I pushed him away from me with a senseless affair that can never replace what I had with Jim. It was a moment of temporary pleasure that cost me everything. Should I have let him be by my side for the last 6 months? I can't say for sure how long I sat at the table and sobbed, but eventually, a colleague noticed me and took me to the ladies' room. Through tears, I told Mary about the situation. At first, she was furious at my husband for his obvious cruelty. But after I told her my version of the story and the reasons for his departure, her anger turned to me. "Are you stupid or crazy?" she exclaimed. "Giselle, this man adored you. He cherished you. He was completely fascinated by you. And did you do that to him? You must be crazy to let a catch like Jim slip away like that. What were you thinking? Even on the worst day, your lover couldn't match Jim. Stupid woman. I feel sorry for you," she continued. "I didn't expect Jim to find out about it. I just wanted to have fun," I replied bitterly. But husbands always guess. They notice when you start behaving differently. All cheaters get caught sooner or later. It all starts with the little things. Perhaps you started ignoring your husband in small ways, while your lover made you feel desirable and attractive. Before you knew it, you were completely immersed in the novel, not noticing how much pain you were causing your husband, Giselle. Jim knew all along. He felt that something was wrong and most likely revealed the truth. "You were too absorbed in your deception to notice it," Mary said. "Oh my God, have I lost him?" I sobbed. "Maybe, or maybe there's still hope," Mary suggested. "You have to talk to him. He needs closure. He's going to need it. Perhaps you have a small chance to earn his forgiveness. Maybe you won't forget, but forgiveness is possible," Mary continued. "Today, he filed divorce papers with me. He's been acting weird all week, and now he's not even answering my calls. I lost him. He would never have left like that, quitting his job and everything else, if he hadn't left me. Why didn't I see this coming? Why did I keep seeing Sam? Oh God, I ruined my life, my marriage, everything," I sobbed again. "You will definitely do it, Giselle. Trust me, I know you can do it," Mary said. "Why are you so sure?" I asked. "Because I was in your place, facing the same difficulties. I had a stormy relationship too. My partner dumped me, causing chaos and pain. But I persevered," Mary said. "Have you been unfaithful to your spouse too?" I asked, stunned. "Yeah, I didn't notice subtle changes in my behavior towards my husband until it was too late. This is the danger of infidelity. At first, you try to hide everything. You find yourself behaving atypically for you, and all because you are afraid of the consequences of your husband finding out about your infidelity. Over time, you begin to feel confident, believing that you are able to deceive him. This false sense of security makes you forget about guilt and start showing more affection for your husband. Eventually, you begin to doubt your husband's masculinity because he still doesn't notice your infidelity. It dawns on you that he may have known all along, and one day he presents you with evidence, leaving you in shock. Just like today, the truth has finally been revealed, and you can only wonder how he managed to reveal your secret. My lover and I even recorded a movie on DVD together. Our lawyers fought a fierce battle against the divorce. I begged my husband to give me another chance, promised to change, and confessed my indissoluble love to him. But my efforts were in vain. As a result of the divorce, I lost everything that was dear to me, my husband and his pure love for me, his beloved queen. I tainted our once perfect love by making forgiveness impossible, even for myself. If I were in his place, I wouldn't be able to forgive myself either," Mary finished her story. "Oh my God, he's gone." I began to complain again. I was left all alone. "The situation doesn't seem promising to you right now, Giselle, but if you make an effort, you may be able to earn his forgiveness." He really cared about you a lot, and everyone knows about it. If you make a sincere attempt, you may be able to change his attitude towards you, Giselle," Mary continued to comfort. "I have no idea where he is now. He left his job and moved in a week ago. His current whereabouts are unknown. He could be anywhere in the world," I said. "We'll find him eventually. He'll have to show up, even if it's only to get the divorce papers," Mary suggested. "By the time that happens, it will be too late to fix the situation," I said. "Contact his lawyer and insist that Jim contact you at the earliest opportunity. He may not tell you his location, but if he calls, you can try to track the phone number and determine his location," she replied. "And if he doesn't get in touch, what then?" I complained. "There are various modern methods of finding people, Giselle. We'll find him, absolutely," Mary tried to keep a positive and encouraging tone. But deep down, she was afraid that Jim had left for a certain reason, most likely related to their impending divorce. Mary was sympathetic to Jim's reluctance to communicate with his future ex-wife, feeling how he was afraid to seem weak, thinking about reconciliation. She herself went through a similar situation with her husband, who was ashamed that he had allowed his cheating wife to manipulate him into having a heartbreaking conversation about their relationship. Mary understood Jim's situation like no one else, knowing firsthand what difficulties had to be overcome in a crumbling marriage marked by betrayal. Mary tried to convince him not to go for a divorce, but in the end, he remained adamant and left her. Neither of them had remarried since, and Mary was sure her ex hadn't even looked at the dating app. Their divorce was finalized more than 2 years ago, but the pain still did not leave Mary. After going through her own painful divorce, Mary was determined to do everything she could to help Giselle deal with her heartache. She knew all too well how devastating it was to get divorce papers, and she could empathize with Giselle's pain. Giselle needed Mary's support more than she could have imagined, and Mary was ready to be by her friend's side at every turn. She knew it would take time to heal, but she was determined to help Giselle get through this difficult stage in her life. I had been working for several weeks when I got the call. It was Amanda, my lawyer, who informed me that Giselle wanted to talk. She refused to sign anything and was determined to fight for the preservation of the marriage. I couldn't understand why she was resisting, especially when she already had the man she wanted. Or not. I had a feeling that deep down, she was suffering because I found out the truth, dumped her, and filed for divorce. "I may not agree with what you did, Jim, but I understand why you did it," she said. In the end, she will resist, dragging out the situation until it becomes costly in terms of legal fees. I suggest we talk to her and convince her to drop the case. Perhaps she will understand the gravity of the situation and decide to move on, she continued. "Is she ready to talk now?" "No. I spent months trying to get her to communicate and open up. I spent months trying to revive the love and desire I once felt for her, and now she wants to talk. I'm sorry for being angry, but it really upsets me," I replied angrily. "And now what?" she asked. "Have you heard the good news yet? Sammy, Giselle's ex-lover, is in trouble. He tried to force himself back into her life after she was done with him forever. The police were called, and eventually, he was arrested. It turned out that other women knew about his behavior and also made accusations. I have a feeling that someone has blabbed about him. Why am I not surprised that it was you, Jim?" I decided to change the subject. "Amanda, as a representative of the court, you should know better," I replied. "I've never accused you, Amanda, but now I see the truth. Don't worry, I'll keep your secret. I hope this troublemaker gets what he deserves," I said. "I agree. We both want justice. Okay, I'll arrange for you to meet Giselle next Saturday afternoon at the Charo Bar. She knows this place." "How are you holding up, Jim?" "What is it?" she asked. "It still hurts, but my new job is helping me," I replied. "Thanks for taking care of everything, Amanda," I thanked her. "You're a very good man, Jim. I admire the way you tried to handle the situation before it got out of hand." "It's a pity that Giselle didn't realize this sooner," Amanda replied. Our conversation didn't go well. Jim categorically refused to consider the possibility of reconciliation. He made it clear that I had destroyed all chances of correcting the situation, and there was no way to restore what I had lost. He believed that our marriage was beyond repair, and he wanted to move on. In the end, I had to accept that our marriage was over. I had no choice but to accept defeat. As soon as I heard his voice and saw the determination in his eyes, I realized that I had made a serious mistake. It was impossible to convince him otherwise. If I had noticed the signs earlier, maybe we would have had a chance to save our relationship. But now, it seems impossible. The most painful thing about all this? My love for him is unshakable, eternal. I just didn't realize the depth of my feelings until it was too late. He found a new job, left me with the belief that he might never come back. It's very difficult to accept the fact that I have been living a life for much longer and in a much more harmful way. My heart is heavy with emptiness. My lover is no more. He is facing a prison sentence. My husband is no more. He is on his way to becoming my ex-husband. All that's left of our marriage is to file for divorce. I'm still in my prime. I have the opportunity to start all over again. But time is running out, and soon I will find myself in a difficult position to start a family. I couldn't keep my first husband, whom I sincerely loved, even though I betrayed him with my infidelity. I made it clear to those who witnessed what happened that I proved them wrong. Today, I officially signed the final documents. The divorce of the day marked the beginning of the end, and the divorce of the absolute sealed it. The process was cold, formal, and empty. When I finished my gym classes, I realized that my life has changed dramatically. Giselle is no longer a part of it. I live in another city, and my new job takes up all my time. Despite the long, cold nights, I didn't have time to think about the recent past. Although everything seemed empty at first, now I'm starting to see the silver linings. My technology program exceeds my expectations, and our business is making great strides thanks to our joint efforts. I recently found a beautiful house that I moved into, and I hope that I will feel at home soon. In addition, promising prospects for female communication have appeared on the horizon. Although I'm wary of new relationships, I go on dates from time to time. I hope that soon I will be able to step over the unpleasant situation that has been left behind, and I will be able to look for someone special again. I am sure that this person will not look like Giselle in appearance, behavior, or demeanor, and this suits me. Now I have almost completely come to terms with her, and if a little more time passes, I believe that even the thought of someone like her will no longer affect me. It's been about 4 years since I've been living a new life as a bachelor, and recently, Amanda called me with delight in her voice. She told me that she took up the case of a man who was betrayed by his wife, and this wife turned out to be Giselle. Amanda said that this deceived man has grandiose plans to leave the cheating Giselle in distress, neither leaving her nor giving her a dollar after the divorce. I thanked Amanda for the news, but said I wasn't interested in knowing what was going on with Giselle. After saying goodbye to Amanda, I realized that Giselle had embarked on the wrong path, and this would ruin her completely. Story 3. At Karen's request, I arrived at the Tumbleweed Hotel feeling a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. It was a quiet hour, and I knew that her intentions had nothing to do with simple entertainment. This place was of great importance to both of us because it was here that our paths first crossed 13 years ago. A feeling of unease swept over me, confirming the suspicions I had been harboring for some time. There were subtle signs of infidelity. For example, she stayed up late at the office where she worked as her boss's secretary. Our intimate life suffered. She showed no interest in intimacy with me. I noticed new provocative clothes in her closet that she never wore in my presence. The most painful blow was the decrease in her interest in communicating with me. Even during meals, we hardly exchanged words, and she rarely stayed at home to eat with me and our 2 children, Max and Megan. Her neglect of me hurt, but I was even more infuriated by her neglect of our children. It was obvious that she had put them on the back burner, leaving me to take care of them while she pursued her own desires. After parking the car in an almost empty parking lot, I decided to stay calm during this meeting. I suspected that she intended to reveal the truth based on a conversation I overheard a couple of nights ago. It was Tuesday, exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she successfully brought me here. Sitting in the car, I was thinking about a possible scenario in which she might be with the person I suspected. I remembered the advice that my father gave me many years ago, and which has served me well in my professional life. Don't do anything if you don't know what to do. Don't say anything, let your opponent figure out the situation for himself. The less you open up, the more worried they will be, and if they don't worry, they will become vulnerable, he told me. His words echoed in my mind, reminding me to be silent and watch. By holding onto my thoughts and emotions, I could gain the upper hand and strategically plan my next move. I smiled, feeling grateful to my father and his wisdom. I knew he was looking out for me at this moment. After saying a silent prayer of thanks, I entered the bar and noticed Karen sitting with a man I didn't recognize. This was not surprising. My company, Steinbeck Incorporated, which I founded 10 years ago, took up all my time during the day, leaving me with few opportunities to communicate with people in her workplace. As an electrical engineer, my company specialized in designing electrical wiring and other electrical systems for construction companies that needed my services. I approached the two of them, and she, noticing my presence, turned to me. "Hi, Mark," she said, without using any affectionate expressions or giving me a peck on the cheek, a simple greeting. I said, emphasizing the words, "What's going on?" The man turned to face me. "Mr. Steinbeck, or do you prefer Mark? We brought you here today to inform you that your wife and I have been having an affair for some time," she said. She was tired of hiding and making excuses, so I convinced her to tell you the whole truth. As I expected, I was somewhat prepared for this, and the dictaphone in my jacket pocket gave me an advantage. I hoped I had it all written down. I was silent, not wanting to provoke my father's anger by saying something stupid. I looked at Karen, waiting for an answer from me, but I didn't say anything. Maybe she thought I was in shock or something and kept talking. "Mark, it was incredibly difficult for me to hide this from you. I don't want you to get hurt. I'm not going to leave you simply. Well, having an intimate relationship with Jason is something I can't give up. I hope you can understand. I can't hide it from you anymore. You deserve to know," she insisted. I wasn't sure if she fully realized how ridiculous her arguments sounded. At that moment, it became obvious to me that Karen, despite the fact that for obvious reasons she never graduated from college, was not as smart as I had previously thought. And as for the military genius she'd left me for, no further explanation was needed. I went to the end of the bar where the bartender pretended not to hear what he couldn't help but hear. I ordered a draft beer, and he brought it to me silently. Sipping it, I watched them look at me. There was confusion on both their faces. After finishing my beer, I left. I could feel their eyes on me when I left the place. It was nice. For the first time in months, I felt like I had an advantage. Maybe it was my imagination, but that's how I felt. I went straight home. The children were waiting for me. I greeted them with kisses, laughter, and the promise of a pleasant weekend. They were amused, and we went to eat ice cream while I shared my plans with them. I had arranged in advance that they would spend the weekend with Aunt Susan and Uncle Doug. My sister and brother-in-law adored Max and Megan because they couldn't conceive a child themselves. Therefore, Max and Megan became the most beloved people in the world for them. I knew that Stu and Doug were going camping for the weekend, and now the kids were going with them. This gave me the opportunity to do the necessary things. "Is everything okay, Mark?" asked Doug. Doug had an amazing ability to anticipate events. "To be honest, no," I replied. "I'm divorcing Karen. The children don't know yet." His answer took me by surprise. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I noticed a few things," he explained. "And Sue too. Last Christmas, Karen really paid attention to me. I refused her, and she tried to dismiss it as a joke, but it didn't fool me. Sue made me promise not to tell you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." "It's all right," I assured him. "I'm just grateful that you agreed to look after the children for a couple of days. I need time to sort things out." "Listen, Mark, if you need any help, just let me know," Doug offered. "Thanks, Doug. I'll keep that in mind. But I think I can handle it. It's going to be messy, but I have evidence, and this is not a state without blame, so I shouldn't have any problems bringing them to justice," I explained. "After I leave here, I will go to Henry to start acting," I continued. Henry Morgan was a very competent lawyer for my company. Despite the fact that Henry was very old, he remained as witty as ever. He had connections with every judge and reputable lawyer in the state, not to mention the city. Karen couldn't help but know what I was capable of if I found out about her infidelity. I should have assumed that she took precautions to protect herself. She thought that an agreement with a friend for intimacy would prevent me from taking drastic measures if I accidentally stumbled upon them. These were erroneous arguments, but the more I thought about them, the more they seemed to be the only logical explanation. She was afraid that I would find out about it and catch her off guard. Well, that's exactly what I was going to do. Yes, Henry, that's the situation, I said, suddenly appearing at his house. I gave him the recording in the name of the bartender who witnessed the strange encounter between my wife and her lover just a few hours ago. Okay, I'll have them both served on Monday, Henry confirmed. Are you going home? Henry asked. Yes, I think so. I don't want to tip her off too soon. I'll kick her out as soon as you tell me they've been served, I replied. Malcolm stated that he intended to interrogate the witness and force him to sign an affidavit the next day. Despite the fact that it was Sunday, he stressed the importance of speed in their work and outlined his strategy to hit hard and fast, leaving opponents confused and defeated. I admired Malcolm's thinking and thanked Henry for his support, expressing sympathy for my failed marriage and its impact on Max and Megan. As I left the conversation, I felt confident, knowing that Malcolm, the former ranger, and Henry, the formidable lawyer, were leading me forward. My plan was to retreat and not let the situation escalate. I instructed Henry to refuse my future ex-wife anything she asked, being sure that her actions, confirmed by the recording, would give Henry the leverage with which he could defeat her in court. I trusted Henry's judgment implicitly and believed that his words were absolutely true. As I drove home, optimism grew in me. I felt that this might be the last weekend before my divorce was resolved. When I arrived home, I was stunned to see an unfamiliar car parked in the driveway. I immediately recognized it as Jason's car. As darkness fell, I wondered if I would be lucky enough to capture at least some evidence of their affair. I parked a few houses away and approached the house unnoticed, hoping to remain unnoticed. The lights were off, and as I approached the house, I noticed my neighbor Rex, still a police officer, taking out the trash. I positioned myself next to an unfamiliar car, making sure Rex could see me. He greeted my presence with a wave of his hand. I accepted his gesture and felt relieved that he had witnessed the presence of the car, providing another witness in this case. I mentally wrote down the license plate number and planned to give it to Henry, as well as Rex's name and address if possible. I also intended to get photo evidence. I went out into the backyard, pretending to collect the trash can, while Rex returned to the house. Taking advantage of the opportunity, I discreetly took some pictures through the sliding glass doors in the backyard. I thanked modern mobile phone technologies for allowing such covert filming. I managed to take about 10 pictures of Jason and my future ex-wife doing intimate things. I put the phone away and entered the house through the sliding glass door, making my presence known. Despite my intervention, they continued their actions, demonstrating a complete lack of respect. I was fuming, but I kept my composure, waiting for the right moment. About 15 minutes later, I heard the front door open and close downstairs, and then I heard the roar of Jason's engine as he drove away. After waiting a couple of minutes, I decided to go back downstairs to the kitchen. Passing by the bathroom, I heard the sound of a running shower. I poured myself a cup of coffee and waited patiently. It was going to be an interesting conversation. 10 minutes later, she finally joined me. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of kindness. I didn't say anything, just took a sip of coffee, waiting for her to say something important. It bothered me that she didn't even ask about the kids. This woman standing in front of me was completely different from the one I married more than 10 years ago. "Mark, we need to talk. The children are with my sister now." "I think you should know," I said. "What?" "Oh yeah, I noticed they weren't at home when I got back," she replied, pretending to be ignorant. She looked worried. "Now listen, are you okay?" she stuttered. I just wanted to be honest with you. I didn't want to keep sneaking out with him. You deserve better, Mark. Everything is purely physical with Jason, only intimacy. I won't deprive you of anything when we're together, and he knows about it and doesn't mind. He's a good man. Actually, it was his idea to stop hiding things from you. I couldn't resist, she confessed, her voice full of regret. So I can make love to my own wife, and Jason doesn't mind? Well, damn it, that's very generous of him, I replied sarcastically. Don't be sarcastic, Mark. Honesty is always the best policy, she said, as if breaking a wedding vow was an exception to this rule. I couldn't help but smile. Mark, for God's sake, say something, she demanded. What do you want me to say? If I told you to call him and get it over with, would you call? I asked, challenging her. Well, I continued when she didn't answer. Then I have nothing more to say. But yes, you were right. I really deserve better, I said, hiding my laughter. Outwardly, I remained calm and balanced. You're not a cuckold or whatever, she said. You are my husband, a wonderful father, and I love you, she pleaded. Leave it alone, Karen. I'm leaving. Don't wait for me, I said, wanting to get rid of her presence. She was dead to me. Monday should have marked the end, and she would have become history. I set off on my way back and found myself back at Tumbleweed. When I took my place at the end of the bar, the same bartender was on duty there. The bar was crowded, especially for a Tuesday night. I ordered a draft beer and casually asked the bartender, "What's going on here?" gesturing at the crowd. He nodded towards the far corner. The lighting was dim, but I could make it out. Jason passionately kissed one of the ladies. So, the cheater was now cheating on another cheater. I was not surprised by this situation. Maybe he wasn't cheating on another cheater, maybe the other cheater knew about his other interests. I overheard it today, and I can testify if necessary. Thank you. Maybe I will, I replied. A few years ago, my wife pulled a similar trick on me, but there was no one to support me, and I suffered a lot in court. At least I managed to keep this place. That's something. I think it would be nice if I didn't have to give half of my income to alimony. We talked for the next 4 hours in a row. I made a mental note to discuss with Henry the possibility of helping this guy get justice if he would help me expose Romeo and Juliet. Weaklings should stick together. Jason never noticed me at the bar, and I managed to take some good pictures of him and his partner. I would have used them as evidence if my wife really thought she was alone with him, but that will have to wait until the big event on Monday. I got home around 4 in the morning. Josh, the bartender, and I had a few cups of coffee after closing since he lived upstairs from the bar and had nowhere to go. I was probably a good candidate for a late-night conversation. I liked the guy, and he was a great bartender, which was a big plus in my book. I was mad at Karen, but I wanted to sleep in my own bed, not in the guest room. There's something about a man's own bed. My wife knew this about me, and that's probably why she chose to make love in the living room rather than upstairs. I climbed into bed next to her. She was awake, and I felt her hand reach out to me. I quickly pulled my hand away and rolled over onto my back. It looks like she did the same thing. I was woken up by sunlight coming through the window curtains. It was almost 8 o'clock, and I could smell the bacon frying in the kitchen. I got up, took a shower, got dressed, and went downstairs. She was in a good mood, believing that everything was fine, or at least that our marriage was beyond repair. "Good morning, Sonia," she greeted me. "It smells delicious." And so, it was. I was hungry. This may be the last day of our marriage, but I shouldn't have been upset about it. Tomorrow will be chaos, but today will be a good day. I had a hunch. "I'll be by your side all day today," she said, as if it was some kind of special favor, since I was being reasonable. "And if you behave yourself, you might get lucky," she added with a giggle. I didn't know whether to laugh or be disgusted. How could my cheating wife believe that I would readily accept what she was offering? I grinned back. "This morning, I need to take the car to the store to buy new brakes. Maybe we'll talk later." It would not be easy to avoid it, but I was determined. While I was doing the brakes, which was actually true, I discreetly put the recorder next to the kitchen phone. I foresaw that she would use this phone if she called him, and I was right. The intrigue was fascinating. 3 hours later, I returned home and picked up the recorder while she was taking out the trash. I went to my office to listen to the recording. It hurt me to hear her say she loved him, especially since I knew he didn't care about her. I couldn't wait to show her the dated photos I'd received the night before. It would definitely shock her. I was sitting in my office with mixed feelings. I realized that I got married stupidly. I was ashamed. I doubted whether it was worth divorcing her at all, given her irresponsibility for her actions. The audacity of her and her lover made any reconciliation impossible. And then there are the children. It was obvious that she didn't care about them, and that was unforgivable. The next morning, I left the house before she even woke up. Monday was the beginning of the end for her and her lover. I started my day by telling my secretary, Elizabeth, that I would not be home for the rest of the day. Being the boss had its advantages. The first thing I did was go to Henry's office, where he had news. His part-time private investigator, Malcolm, gathered information about Romeo. It turned out that Romeo was married and had 6 children, and his wife, who was 10 years older, had money and a family. She had no idea about his adventures. I instructed Henry to expose him completely and provided him with the recording and photos on my mobile phone. Henry smiled at that. Maybe I'll have a special job for him and Malcolm when everything settles down. I knew Sue and Duck would take care of getting the kids ready for school. The thought of having to talk to them later scared me, but it was inevitable. Henry arranged for the lovers to be taken to their place of work. A restraining order was placed on her, preventing her from returning to the house, and the same applied to him. The papers were supposed to be delivered shortly before lunch. I asked Henry to make sure that it was done loudly and dramatically. I wanted both lovers to feel the pain later. I also asked that all the evidence against the couple be provided to Jason's wife, and it was up to her what she would do with them. I really wanted to be there when my wife was being served, and then I thought, why not? I settled down in the hallway at the moment when the waiter appeared. He didn't know me, and I didn't know him, so he just walked past me towards my wife's office. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Karen Steinbeck?" he asked. "Yes, of course," she replied with a smile. I was watching her from the doorway, and at first, she didn't notice me because she was busy talking to the server. He handed her a manila envelope. "You have been served," he announced. Her expression darkened. She looked at the envelope in her hand and opened it. Her face turned pale, and tears began to flow. She collapsed into a chair. At that moment, her boss appeared from the office, saw her trouble, and tried to comfort her. I became more visible. She noticed me, and her eyes widened. "Mark, why?" I couldn't help myself. "Like you said, I deserve better." With that, I left. Although I was not present at this, I later found out that Jason was served in a similar way. From the realization that his life was, in fact, over, he lost consciousness. In the end, he lost everything: a wife, children, a house, a job. I was wrong about only one thing. Karen wasn't the biggest fool in the world, she was only the second largest. A few days later, I found myself in Henry's office, sipping a hot drink. "So, do you think you can help him, even though it's been so long since it happened?" I asked. "Yes, I think so. This woman has a lot of secrets hidden away, and she is ready to reconsider the terms of their divorce just to keep them a secret. We will try to get alimony waived if possible." "Mark, haven't you realized yet that I can do anything?" he chuckled. "I'm getting better," I replied, joining in his laughter. Later that day, I sat in the Tumbleweed bar and chatted with my newfound friend. "You will never have to pay alimony again." I can't tell you how grateful I am for that, especially considering how she flaunted it at the time. "I'm glad I could help," I said. After the divorce, Karen was left with nothing, but she miraculously managed to keep her job. A long-term relationship with her boss allowed her to avoid the consequences of her actions. This time, Jason, as already mentioned, was no more. I met with Karen the day after the momentous event. I had something I wanted to give her. I knew that I might have to endure her pleas and pleas, but it was worth the risk. "Mark, is there really no way out? I mean, what about the kids?" I foresaw that she would play this card, and I refused her. "You haven't shown any interest in the children for months, Karen. Your new boyfriend has absorbed all your attention. Mark, he's a good man. He looks so much like you, that's why I fell in love with him at first sight. He loves me too. That's why we tried so hard to make you understand. We did this for you, so that you would open up and be honest. And now you've decided to ruin us all of us, even the children. How could you?" The tears started to flow again. She really pissed me off this time. She blamed me for everything. God, I was furious. "Mark, it's not too late. We still have a chance, if that's what you want. I can make Jason understand that you have needs too. You will always be my number one. You are the father of our children. How can you be someone else? Jason is a stranger. He is not a part of us. I promise I'll make you happy if you just give me a chance." I was almost speechless. I couldn't even find the words to express my anger. It was stupid, idiotic, and pointless. She needed help, but someone else had to provide it. She was no longer a part of my life. "Karen, I came here today for 2 reasons. First of all, I will allow you an unlimited number of visits with the children, but under no circumstances with a lover. I will also give you some money so that you can find a new place to live. But after that, you will be on your own. The condition of my generosity is that you will not dispute the divorce in any case. If you do, I will resist with all my might. And, Karen, you have no idea what I'm capable of. Have you guessed it yet?" She stared at me. It was obvious that she was desperately hoping that I would take her back and not object to her continuing her relationship with this idiot. As I said, she needed help. Secondly, this is it. I pushed the folder towards her. "Please check the dates at the bottom of the photos," I asked. These were the photos of Jason and his mistress that I took last Saturday night. She pulled them out and stared at them. "But they are from last Saturday night. You are not his true love. I've never been one. He's a gambler. Have a happy life," I said. I got up, left a $20 bill on the table for the waitress, and left. When I left the building, she stayed, shedding tears of despair.